Mommy, I ain't gonna hold you. This whole episode, you were selling. She had her head on his shoulder. And you decided to pull up. Wow. Not only in this episode does she interrupt them once, but she interrupts them twice, Brian. They're holding hands. Man. So I just finished watching episode 4 of I Made Friends with the Second Prettiest Girl in My Class, and you know I gotta talk about it. The episode picks off right where the last one ended with Amami confronting the class about the Maya Hata hate that she seems to see. And just as Amami's about to go off on the whole class, Asanagi actually raises her hand. She says, wait, I won. Which obviously, as the viewer, you're like, let's go! We cut to Maya Hata and Asanagi in what seems to be like a group meeting for the festival. And we see that Asanagi proceeds to praise Maya Hata, but she does it in a very weird way. She does it in a way where she's kind of uplifting her, but then lowering herself in the process. And even Maya Hata notices it, and he's like, wait, why did Asanagi sound a little down? Then we cut back to them in class where Asanagi's asking the class if any of them have any decoration ideas. And Maya Hata ends up raising his hand and he says, I have an idea, and he says mosaic art using cans. When I read that the first time, I legit went, I have no idea what that is. We cut to Maya Hata and Asanagi in a classroom together, and we see that Maya Hata starts to thank her for being his partner. And then she proceeds to give him a white piece of paper, and she says, here, I have a gift for you. And then she says, actually, I didn't win. So it turns out that she just grabbed a white piece of paper and she wrote that she had won, and then she pretended to pull it out. That way she could be partners with Maya Hata in terms of organizing the festival. We cut to the scene where Asanagi seems to be drawing a manga cover, and she actually does a pretty good job. Then Amami pulls up and she says, hey, can I try drawing this? And then we see that Asanagi's visibly upset. Mami ends up drawing it, and she actually ends up doing a really good job. And we see again that Asanagi's visibly upset. And we see that Maya Hata even notices that she's upset, but then she says, if she's this good, we should just leave the art to her. We then cut to Maya Hata at home on his laptop working on the festival. He ends up feeling lonely and he ends up calling Asanagi, who is currently at karaoke with Amami and some friends, but she ends up dipping on them so she could go with Maya Hata. But we see that she was followed. I think we all know who that is. Then we get this cute, wholesome scene where, bro, she leans on his shoulder, bro. It's so cute. Hey, Amami ruins it! She pulls up talking about some Asanagi. I know you're here. Why didn't you tell me you were hanging out with Maki? Then, out of nowhere, we get a flashback moment where it seems that Asanagi wanted to hang out with these two girls that she thought were her friends, but they end up declining her offer. And they end up telling her, oh, sorry, I have plans. And she's like, oh, that's good. Like, it's fine. But on the day they were supposed to hang out, she's walking by and then she spots both of them, and guess who pulls up? None other than Amami. So they ditched her to hang out with Amami. After this, Asanagi ends up leaving the house, and the next day we see that she's been leaving my boy on red. No! Asanagi clearly doesn't want to talk about what happened, and she wants to act like nothing ever happened. But due to this, Maya Hata actually ends up confronting her, and he says in front of all her classmates, I've got something important to say to you. And they end up meeting in the storage room, and she tells him like, what are you doing? Like, it's a secret that we're friends. He ends up saying, it's your fault for leaving me on red. Loki, he valid. And they get to talking, and she ends up asking him like, aren't you gonna ask like why I've been avoiding you and all that other stuff? But he ends up telling her like, I'm not gonna force it out of you. I'll wait when you're ready to tell me. And this leads to her hugging him from the back. Yeah! She ends up telling him, Maya Hata, you dumb. She ends up telling him that he's a really nice person and he's just a softie at the end of the day, and some nasty person might take advantage of him someday, in parentheses her. Obviously, we don't think she's a nasty person, but that's what she thinks of herself at the moment. And she proceeds to tell him, if I said I wanted to fess up, would you hear me out? Which he proceeds to say, yes. Can I ask you to wait until after the school festival? We cut to the festival day and it was a success. Then we get my favorite moment in the entire episode. I'm not gonna hold you. He proceeds to ask Asanagi if he can hold her hand. That's my boy right there! He proceeds to tell him like, are you trying to lift my spirits? Like, you looking out for me? And she holds his hand! Smiling over here talking about your hands are so warm. Man, y'all like each other so much, I ain't gonna hold you. But then we get Amami interrupting again. That's twice in one episode, gang. What are you doing? And she ends up telling Asanagi, sorry, Umi, I got too into talking to some friends. And she proceeds to try to introduce the two friends to Maya Hata, saying, Umi and I have been friends with them since elementary school. But and then Asanagi says, well, that's actually not true. After all, you two don't really see me as a friend, do you? And the episode ends with her telling Maya Hata and Amami, let me tell you about my petty little inferiority complex.